Have you ever wondered when you're looking at something like a treasure hunt, like the John Collins Black, there's treasure inside, why is it that people behave the way that they do, the treasure hunters? For example, people have created online communities. They share a lot of what they're finding. Some people have shared their full solves or what they think is a solve, and they've just offered it up to someone else and said something like, hey, if you find the treasure, I just ask that you give me the box as a token and maybe one or two of the items in it if you're willing, but it's up to you. Why is it that people do that? It seems counter to winning the game. Well, there's actually been research done on game players and different game types. And in 1995 or 6, Dr. Richard Bartle proposed a framework for understanding how people played in these early multi-user dungeons and multiplayer video games in that era. And he identified really four main types. And one of the types I'll rename just because I don't know how the YouTube, if it looks for keywords and it doesn't like certain words because they sound violent. So I'm going to change one of the words for you. So there are achievers, explorers, socializers, and we'll call them dominators or something like that. To avoid that fourth. And you can Google and see what I'm actually referring to if you want. It's nothing really bad, but I just for the sake of not wanting to get any marks against me unintentionally, I'll just say achievers, explorers, socializers, and dominators. So this one is actually an older theory, and there are newer theories that kind of point to the same general categories. They define it a little bit differently, but they're a little more complex. And I thought I'd start with this one because it's just so easy to talk about. And this is not a pure science. Some of the newer theories are stronger. They're more substantiated by a larger population of gamers to see that these patterns really hold up. But this one is a little bit older, but I think it'll be useful for our purposes, and it'll help us to understand some of the people alongside us when we're participating in some kind of contemporary alternate reality game or a treasure hunt game or some kind of learning game or experience or something like that. So the first one are the achievers, and these people are motivated by mastery. They want to be the first. They want to crack the code. They want to find the prize. They often stay pretty tight-lipped. And these hunters optimize tracking patterns. They analyze the odds. They are quite meticulous. You're not going to see these people very active in the communities most of the time in the same way as some of the others. And then you have those who we call explorers. Now, explorers are motivated by understanding and discovery. They're the ones who want to dig into obscure references. They study the author's mind. They build elaborate theories, often without ever getting boots on the ground to do anything. You might notice that I have a pretty strong tendency as a researcher to be an explorer. And that's why I like creating these videos that I hope you find useful and other participants and designers can find useful as well. And the explorers, the reward really is the discovery. Now, here's the thing. There are different kinds of explorers, though, and sometimes one of the weaknesses of an explorer, so if a weakness of the achiever is that they lose on the disadvantage of collaboration and cooperation sometimes, unless there are a core secret group of achievers. For explorers is if they're not careful, if they get overly poetic and metaphorical, they can find themselves going down all sorts of rabbit holes and chasing theories that have very little to do with the designer and any likely chance that the designer was thinking of that kind of a clue. And so explorers need to be careful about that tendency in themselves. And so one of the ways you can ground yourself is an explorer can spend a lot of time trying to get to know the designer and realizing that games are not entirely subjective. A treasure hunt has an actual treasure and an actual location, and there are clues intended to lead toward that actual location. You can't just sort of move the treasure with your mind or make something be true because you want it to be true. There's an objectivity to a treasure hunt search. And so, but it's tied to the intent of the designer of the treasure. So a good strategy for an explorer is to take the time to try to understand the designer and really use your skill and your curiosity to better understand the rules of the game, the mind of the designer, and that can give you some real interest and help you be successful. And then there are The socializers. These are the people who are predominantly motivated by community and connection with others. They are often the forum moderators, they're podcast collaborators, they're team builders. They share freely, sometimes even too freely, because their joy is actually in the journey and connecting with other people. And so socializers are sometimes the ones who are likely, socializers and explorers are the ones who are most likely to just give a bunch of their solves and their clues and their ideas out there along the way. And socializers can add a really richness to a game-based learning experience or a treasure hunt or something like that. And this is really helpful to understand that some people are intentionally or unintentionally playing the role of socializer because they're just sort of lend themselves toward it. And then there's this fourth category of these dominators. Again, there's another word that's used, but it's not a bad word or anything, but I just want to be careful. So they are motivated by power, control, or even chaos. So they like to disrupt, they like to sow doubt, they drop false leads, they dominate, sometimes they'll dominate forums, they maybe have a little bit of ego, sometimes they're attention seeking, they like to mislead, they like to create a sort of a chaotic climate. They do all sorts of interesting things, and they find a lot of fun in it, and they force other people to adapt. And they do it with the hope that maybe along the way, sometimes, that they can actually find the treasure first. So they want to mislead others. It's like being in a race, and imagine that if you were in a long-term running race, that the achiever would be the person who's been measuring their time and their performance, and they're very focused on them and getting to the finish line first. And the explorer is maybe fascinated by studying stats and knowing the stats of everyone else and understanding how optimal performance and other things like that. And maybe that leads them to performing really well, but it's actually just the process of kind of studying, exploring, and understanding the race that's really rewarding. And then the socializers are the ones that are partnering with other people and trying to help other people be successful. Even maybe they're going to pace another person, and they know they can't keep that pace up all the way to the finish, but they're going to help the other person get to, if it's a marathon, mile 20 of 26.2, and then they'll probably back off and let the other person go on. The socializer is thinking about those interactions with other people, and they want to do it as a group or a community or help other people or interact, and the feeling of being in the race with everyone is really rewarding. And then these disruptors are the ones that, this isn't allowed in a typical race, but these are the ones that want to maybe undermine maybe cause one of the water stations to be disrupted so people don't get water. They want to try to find ways to cause other people not be as successful, because then they may not have to run as fast to get to the finish line first or something of that sort. But no, one thing that's really interesting is this last category. People look at it and say, wow, that's harsh. That does not sound like a very moral person. But keep in mind that this is gameplay in the minds of many people, of some people. And so, for example, if you are playing a game of basketball and you steal the ball from someone, do you consider that to be unethical? Well, no, it's within the rules of the game. Yeah, but it's not very nice. They had the ball. Well, that's kind of the mindset of the disruptor, or someone who, when you're guarding another person in the game of basketball, you shout in their face when the other person's ready to shoot. So you want to do some things to diminish the effectiveness, or maybe you talk a little bit. You talk at the other player and try to maybe demoralize the other player to get an edge up on them. And sometimes when you meet these individuals outside of the game, they are the kindest, most ethical people that you can meet. But when they get on the court or the competitive surface or they're in the game, they take on a different role, and it's sort of maybe fun for them, or it's meaningful for them. And so I'm not making a statement. You could argue that some of that is acceptable and ethically okay, and others cross a line. If you come from depending on your moral framework, I come from a Christian background, and these moral teachings apply to all places and all circumstances for me. So whether I'm in a game environment or not, there are some things that I believe would be wrong and some things that are right. And so you may be approaching this a little bit different. So I just thought I would offer this to you as a way of thinking about what is happening with all those people around me. And maybe this isn't particularly helpful, but it may allow you to make sense of the environment you're in when you're participating in something like a national treasure hunt or an alternate reality game or other kinds of game environments for learning purposes or other things like that. There you have it.